Right, good evening and welcome to Lecture 2 of Cricket South Africa's Level 1 Umpiring course, brought to you by Western Province Cricket Umpires Association. My name is Tom Mokorosi, and as usual, my co-presenter this evening will be Abdullah Steenkamp. Before we get into today's content, let us go through the meeting protocols for this and every other meeting. You will notice that your microphones are on mute and your cameras are disabled while we present. This is to prevent any distractions to us as presenters, as well as the rest of the candidates in the meeting. Questions will be taken at the end of the presentation, but while we are presenting, you may type in questions into the chat box so that you don't forget your questions, and we will get to all the questions after the presentations. This evening we'll be going through laws 6, 7, and 8. That will be me. And then Abdullah will take us through laws 9, 10, and 11. Yesterday, I forgot to show you the law book, which we have a PDF copy of in the course material and logistics email that I've sent to everybody. If you still do not have that course material and the presentation that we are using for the first 6 lectures, Abdullah, please type into the chat box the WeTransfer link that everybody can use to download this presentation. We use one presentation for all the first 6 lectures, and then for the revision lecture, lecture 7, we will have a summarized presentation, which will be distributed after lecture 7. When the question and answer session starts, that's after Abdullah has presented, I will unmute the microphones and the cameras will be activated so that we can all have a nice and interactive question and answer session. Please raise your virtual hand, which is available in your Microsoft Teams toolbox, and turn on your microphone when prompted to ask your question. We might go over time during the Q&A session. The Q&A session should start, say, an hour and a half into the lecture. You are welcome to leave at any time because we will be recording this session and we will be posting all our lectures on our YouTube channel. Yesterday's lecture was recorded, but as those of you who were here for last night's lecture will know, I am sitting in Klerksdorp. Am busy with South Africa women against Sri Lanka women. It's the 3rd and final one-day international tomorrow in Potchefstroom, and the hotel Wi-Fi does not allow me to download or upload big files, and that's why I haven't been able to upload the lecture from yesterday onto YouTube. When I get home, either late on Thursday or early on Friday, I will be in a position to upload yesterday's lecture as well as today's lecture onto our YouTube channel, and I'll send you those links immediately. If you are wanting to go through the content that was covered in yesterday's lecture, it is exactly the same content that was covered in lecture 1 from our November 2023 level 1 course. So Abdullah is going to post into the chat box right now the link to the YouTube recording of lecture 1 of November 2023's level 1 course. Of course, you won't have Marie Erasmus on that particular lecture, so we will still endeavor to post the level 1 lecture 1 from yesterday on YouTube as soon as I can. Right, so let us move on to today's topics. Law 6 is the pitch. What do we know about the pitch? I'm sure you all know the length of a pitch from one set of stumps to the other set of stumps is easy to remember in yards. It's 22 yards. But of course, us in South Africa, we use centimeters and meters, and our tape measures have centimeters and meters. So good to know the centimeters and meters, and the length of a pitch is 20 meters and 12 centimeters. So what's important here is, Abdullah mentioned yesterday, the law requires us as umpires to be at the field before a match 45 minutes before the scheduled start of play. And one of the duties that we have to carry out as umpires is to measure the length of the pitch and also the creases. And you don't always find that the measurements are 100% accurate. So what do you do if you get to a pitch at 9 a.m. for a 10 a.m. start? Because in Western Provinces Cricket Umpires Association's playing conditions that we follow for club cricket matches in Cape Town, we need to be at our fields an hour before the start of play. If we go and measure the pitch and we find that it is too long or it's too short, what do we do? Well, we have a tolerance distance of 30 centimeters. If it's 29 or even 30 centimeters too short or too long, then we will allow play to take place with that incorrect length of a pitch, because it's only 1% of that 20.12 meters. Okay, so it's not entirely significant. And it's the same for both teams. And it's important that at the toss, we inform both captains for them to inform both of their teams that the pitch is out by X amount. If it is more than 30 centimeters too long or too short, then we have to get a hold of the ground staff to correct the measurements of the length of the pitch, because that then becomes significant in the way that the match is played. It's not always available, the resource of ground staff at a club cricket field, but then you will put the onus on the home captain to either call their ground staff. They might be working at another field or at another club, or if they cannot get a hold of the ground staff, then they, as the home team, need to be able to change those measurements under your supervision to be correct. What about the width of a pitch? Again, easy to remember in feet, but we don't have feet on our tape measures in South Africa. It is 3 meters and 5 centimeters, so 3.05 meters. And this is actually also quite important to remember, because we will learn next week that if the ball lands off the pitch, then it is a no ball according to law, and not a wide. So you'll often find that there are dotted lines on the edge of a pitch marking the extreme width of a pitch, 3.05, so that it's easy for you as an umpire to adjudicate whether the ball has landed on the pitch or has landed off the pitch. Here we can't really take much in terms of the measurement being out. I would say if it is more than 5 centimeters out, then we just need to mark those extremities with dotted lines as to where the 3.05 meters is. And you find that in most club pitches, you don't have dotted lines. So possibly before the start of the season, if you have a road show with all the clubs, then you need to make them aware that it is a good idea, because it's not always easy to see the end of a pitch as to how it's cut. It's a good idea to have those dotted lines painted on the side of the pitch. So here we come into contact with the names of the creases. The stumps are pitched on the bowling crease. And when a grounds person starts with their pitch, they're going to start with the middle stump, and the extremity of each side of the pitch is 1.525 meters. And if you add 1.525 plus 1.525, you get 3.05 meters, which is the entire width of the pitch. How do we select and prepare a pitch? Let's see what the law tells us. The law tells us that before the match, the ground authority shall be responsible for the selection and preparation of the pitch. So that means that us as umpires, we do not decide which pitch in the square is going to be used. We are told by the ground authority when we arrive at a field which pitch they have prepared for the match. During the match, the umpire shall control the use of the pitch and its maintenance. Can we change a pitch during the match? The law tells us that the pitch shall not be changed during the match unless the umpires decide that it is dangerous or unreasonable for play to continue, and then only with the consent of both captains can the pitch be changed. And quite importantly, in the bylaws of Western Province Cricket Association, the pitch can be changed by agreement with the umpires and the captains, but you cannot move the field. Say, for example, the entire square of the first team's field, or let's say the A field at a particular cricket club is waterlogged, and we see that the pitch in the B field is actually playable. We cannot make that decision ourselves to move the match from the A field to the B field. There we would need to call local leagues who oversee matches in Western Province Cricket Association. Are the pitch lengths and widths the same for junior cricket as I have just shown you for senior cricket? The law tells us that the governing body for cricket in each country shall determine the length of the pitch for junior cricket. So the law does not stipulate what that length should be. It leaves it up to the authorities of cricket in the country that is being played in to decide what the lengths of a pitch should be for junior cricket. As far as I've seen here in South Africa, under 13 and even under 11 level, we use the full-size pitches for junior cricket. I'm not sure about under 9 and lower ages. So now we've spoken about the pitch and we've been introduced to one of the creases, the bowling crease. That's where the stumps are pitched. Let's have a look at all the other creases that we will come across on a cricket field. So here we have a picture of the ground which will host tomorrow's Women's One Day International between South Africa and Sri Lanka in Potchefstroom. Back then it was, when this picture was taken, it was called the Senves Oval. It is now known as the JB Marks Oval. And we will see that we have a number of lines in this picture. And we will go on to the next screen, which will give us the names of all of these creases. What the law does not have in the law book is the wide lines. The wide guidelines are part of limited overs playing conditions. Abdullah mentioned yesterday that we are going through the laws of cricket, which are based or are similar to the playing conditions of test match cricket. And if you remember from the last time that you watched a test match on television, there are no wide lines in test match cricket. And so you won't find any wide guidelines in the law book. Some people think that these little lines next to the stumps are wide guidelines for the leg side. They are not. They are actually the lines for the protected area. So that measurement of just outside of the off stump and just outside of the leg stump, that area goes all the way down parallel to the other side of the stumps, and in front of the popping crease, which I'll show you where that is now, 1.52 meters in front of the popping crease, and all the way to the other crease 1.52 meters away. That is called the protected area, where all players need to stay out of that area. It is to protect the pitch so that it doesn't get damaged, for it to maintain its pace and bounce throughout the match as consistent. So let's have a look at all the creases and all of their measurements. And I can tell you that in the Cricket South Africa Level 1 umpiring exam that you will be attempting online from the 13th to the 23rd of May, the measurements and the names of the creases count for 10 marks in total. So good idea for you to study this graphic and know the names and the measurements of all the creases. So we'll start with the bowling crease, which we spoke about earlier in the previous law. The bowling crease is the crease that has the stumps pitched in it. And for me, the most important measurement that I go for after I have measured the length of the pitch from middle stump to middle stump, we know that one is 20.12 meters. The next most important measurement for me is the measurement from the bowling crease to the popping crease. So the popping crease is usually where the batters stand, and it's that long vertical line as we look at it here. From the bowling crease to the popping crease is 1.22 meters. And then you will see that the bowling crease is in between two return creases. Okay, so there's a return crease on the right and there's a return crease on the left. And the length of the return crease, or let's say the minimum length of the return crease, is 2.44 meters. And then the length of the popping crease is a minimum of 3.66 meters. Okay, so you might have come across a little pattern there. I'll go through those measurements again. The length, for me, I call it the no ball length. That is the length between the bowling crease and the popping crease is 1.22 meters. And then the length of the return creases is a minimum of 2.44. And the length of the popping crease is a minimum of 3.66. If you can remember the length from the bowling crease to the popping crease of 1.22, you multiply that by 2, what do you get? You get 2.44, which is the minimum length of the return crease. And if you multiply 1.22 by 3, you get 3.66, which is the minimum length of the popping crease. So by simply remembering the no ball measurement, which for me is the most important measurement after the length of the pitch, if you can remember 1.22, then you can remember 2.44 and you can remember 3.66. The last measurement that you need to remember is the width of the bowling crease, which is effectively from one return crease to the other. That is 2.64 meters. How do we measure these measurements on a Saturday morning before the game? You will see that the arrows always point to the inside edge of each line. And the easy way to remember is that it's always the edge of the line closest to the stumps. So if you look at that no ball measurement of mine of 1.22 meters, it is the back edge of the bowling crease to the back edge of the return crease. And as I mentioned, it's always the edge of the line closest to the stumps. And you will notice in this diagram that the stumps are pitched, cutting the back edge of the bowling crease in half. The stumps are not pitched smack bang in the middle of the width of the line of the bowling crease. They are pitched to cut the back edge of the return crease in half. Or let's say the back edge of the return crease cuts the stumps in half. That is how stumps are correctly pitched. Okay, so make sure you study this diagram, make sure you sing those digits in your head, and make sure you know the names of all three creases. What you will find that might be a little bit tricky in the exam is they might ask for half measurements of a crease. So I'm going to quickly go back and remind you of half of the width of the pitch. So just be careful when it comes to the exam, the arrows as to where it's pointing to. In this case, on our right, the arrows are pointing to the complete width of the pitch. So that's 3.05 meters. But the arrows on the left, you can see it's from middle stump to the one side of the pitch and middle stump to the other side of the pitch. So here, if they were asking for this measurement on the left, top left, then it's 1.52 meters. But if they're asking for the entire width of the pitch, then it's 3.05 meters. Similarly, we don't have in this diagram, we don't have half measurements, but I know that in the exam, they do ask half measurements. So say, for example, the width of the bowling crease, if there's an arrow in the middle stump and they're only asking for the measurement from the middle stump to the one return crease, then it's not going to be 2.64 meters, it's going to be 1.32 meters. Okay, so just be careful of the arrows and take your time before answering the questions in the exam. But 10 marks that you should easily get if you study this diagram carefully. Last law that I'll be going through this evening is law 8, the wickets. This is what a set of stumps and two bails looks like, and together they are referred to as the wickets. From the base of the stump that is above ground to the top of the stump should be 71.12 centimeters. This diagram, I will have you know, you do not need to study it for the level 1 exam, but it is good to know. The width of the wickets when the stumps are correctly pitched from the outside of the off stump to the outside of the leg stump is 22.86 centimeters. So just short of 23 centimeters. Quite importantly, when you pitch a set of stumps and put the bails on top, the bails should sit comfortably with the spigots on top of the stumps and the thick part of the bails in between the stumps. And a cricket ball should not be able to go between two stumps. If a cricket ball does go through two stumps, then it means the stumps are not pitched correctly. What about the bails? Their measurements when in position on top of the stumps should not project more than 1.27 centimeters above the stumps. And as I mentioned, they should sit comfortably on top of the stumps, the spigots, and then the thick part of the stumps should sit in between the stumps. Mark Boucher, infamously, in what turned out to be his last game of cricket, was hit with in the eye with a bail. The bowler bowled the batter out, and the bail, as you can see, flew off from the top of the stumps and into his eye, and that damaged his eye to the extent that he had to retire from all forms of cricket. So what the authorities have done is they have come up with stumps that have a string at the, bails and stumps that have a string attached to them so that the bail cannot fly off more than, say, 15 centimeters away from the top of the stumps. I personally haven't seen those bails and stumps if and when I do get a picture of them, I will add it to the presentation. But it is something that the law allows for safety of players. What happens if the wind is blowing hard and the bails keep falling off? Law tells us that the umpires may agree to dispense with the use of bails if necessary. If they so agree, then no bails shall be used at either end. So if you only have one set of bails which are problematic and keep falling off, we unfortunately have to take off both sets of bails. And it is important in your toolkit as an umpire, if you want to go up the ranks, you need to buy yourself a set of heavy bails so that you can exchange the light bails that most clubs have for your heavy bails to preferably continue to play in windy conditions with heavy bails staying on top of the stumps instead of them blowing off every few balls. Quite importantly, the use of bails shall be resumed as soon as conditions permit. So if the wind dies down later in the day and bails stay on, then you need to put them back on, please. That is my lot for this evening. Abdullah, I'm going to hand over to you and we'll chat again at the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Tom. Good evening to you, as well as good evening to the rest of the attendees. So my section of the lecture will kick off with law number 9. Just give me a second. Let me just get my slides. So law number 9 covers the preparation and the maintenance of the playing area. So this is now after the game has started. So I'll use a test match as an example. Let's say South Africa is playing India in a test match. Test match spans over 5 days. So after the game has started, let's say day 1 is Monday. Test matches usually spans over 5 days and 2-hour sessions of 3 each per day. So game starts at 10 o'clock. So on day 1, before the game starts, the ground authority, they're in charge of preparing the pitch. When it comes to the preparation and the maintenance of the playing area after the game has started, this is what we're covering in law number 9. So the playing area consists of the match pitch and the square, as well as the outfield. So mowing, the law requires that the pitch and the outfield to be mown on each day that the match is expected to take place, ground and weather conditions permitting. So in our 5-day test match, day 1, match starts at 10 o'clock. On day 2, day 3, day 4, and day 5, the law wants the pitch and the outfield to be mown on each day. What are the timing of this mowing? So we know that before the game starts, the ground authority, they prepare the pitch, but as soon as the game has started, the pitch and the outfield to be mowed on day 2, 3, 4, and 5. So when? So when it comes to the mowing of the pitch, completed not later than 30 minutes before the time is the scheduled or rescheduled time. I'll use an example to illustrate what point number 1 is saying. On day 2, game's supposed to start, date's supposed to start at 10 o'clock. So in terms of the mowing of the pitch, not later than 30 minutes before the starting time. So 10 o'clock is our starting time. By 9:30, the mowing of the pitch needs to be completed. So anytime before 9:30, that pitch needs to be mowed. Usually, practically, part of the duties of the fourth umpire in a test match is to supervise the mowing of the pitch. The fourth umpire usually gets to the ground 2 hours, at least 2 to 2.5 hours before play starts. So the game starts at 10. Fourth umpire is usually there by half past 7 already, between 7:30 and 8. So the fourth umpire will supervise the mowing of the pitch, and it usually happens around about between 9:15 and 9:25. There's no exact time when it should happen. All the law tells us is not later than 30 minutes. So if our game starts at, or day starts at 10 o'clock, not later than 30 minutes. So that is the mowing of the pitch. When it comes to the mowing of the outfield, not later than 15 minutes before play is about to start. So mowing of the outfield needs to be done by 9:45 if we have a 10 o'clock start. Clearing of debris from the pitch. What is this debris? You will many a time see where the batters playing their shots and running, bowlers in their delivery stride running, those loose small pebbles that comes from the turf that gets sprayed across the pitch. That is called debris, those small little stones. And because of the batters running and bowlers bowling, you'll find the debris or those small loose stones spread all across the pitch. So the law allows for that debris to be cleared from the pitch. So when? Firstly, you're allowed to clear the debris before the start of each day's play, after the completion of mowing, and before ending rolling, not earlier than 30 minutes, nor later than 10 minutes before play is about to start. So before play is about to start, you can clear the debris from the pitch. Between innings, you can also clear the debris from the pitch, and it needs to be done before rolling. And all intervals for meals, whether it's your tea interval or your lunch interval, debris can also be cleared from the pitch. So the ground staff, they will clear the debris from the pitch. So now we know when this debris can be cleared from the pitch. How do you clear the debris from the pitch? Again, the law guides us by telling us debris to be cleared from the pitch by sweeping. That is how you clear the debris from the pitch. And again, this is done under the supervision of the fourth umpire. So whether it's an interval between innings and they need to clear the debris with a broom, fourth umpire will supervise it. During your lunch and your tea intervals, while they clear the debris, the fourth umpire is there to supervise the clearing. So it is done by sweeping. But there is one exception. You sometimes find pitches that are very brittle, and if you are going to use a broom to clear the debris, you might cause further damage to the pitch. If that is the case, and if the fourth umpire consider that if you are going to use a broom to clear the debris, it might damage the pitch further, you are then allowed to clear the debris from the pitch by the use of a hand. So you'll tell the ground staff, please don't use a broom. Please use your hand to clear the debris from the pitch. When it comes to rolling of the pitch, so remember, our game has now started. Before the game has started, the ground staff or the curator can roll for as long, as many times as he or she wants. But once the game has started, the law guides us that there are only certain times when the pitch can be rolled. So let's have a look at what are those times that the pitch can be rolled once the game has started, and for how long the pitch can be rolled. So now the game has started. So when can rolling take place once the game has started? Firstly, before the start of each innings, rolling can take place, and before the start of each subsequent day's play. These are the only two instances where rolling can take place. So let's say our game starts at day 1, 10 o'clock. South Africa won the toss batting. South Africa gets dismissed for 200 in the first innings. Now India will now go out to bat. What will now happen is the on-field umpires will ask the batting captain of India now, Rohit, do you want rolling? If Rohit say yes, we will then allow rolling, and we'll get to now the period of rolling. Just the point I'm trying to emphasize is before the start of each innings, rolling will be allowed. That is what I'm trying to emphasize here. That's the first instance where rolling is allowed. The second instance is before the start of each subsequent day's play. So before the start of day 2, you'll allow rolling. Before the start of day 3, you'll allow rolling. Similarly, day 4 and day 5. So these are the two instances where you will allow rolling. How long are you allowed to roll? You're allowed to roll for not more than 7 minutes. That's all that the law tells you. Not more than 7 minutes. So can you roll for 5 minutes? Yes, you can. Can you roll for 3 minutes? Yes, you can. Can you roll for 1? You can. All the law tells us not more than 7 minutes. So practically what happens, and I'll give you an example what usually happens in a test match. So when an innings ends, let's say South Africa gets bowled out for 200, it's now India's turn to go bat. The on-field umpires will ask the Indian captain, do you want rolling? Indian captain will say, let's say, yes, I do want rolling. And if the batting captain wants, at the time now wants rolling, there are usually 3 options or 3 rollers available. In the next slide, we'll see pictures of the rollers. Usually at international level, there's a hand roller, there's a medium roller, and a big roller. So you'll ask the batting captain, do you want rolling? Yes. How long do you want rolling? If they say 5 minutes or 7 minutes, you'll say, okay, 7 minutes. And which roller do you want? You want the hand roller, the medium, or the big roller? Let's say the captain tells you, big roller for 7 minutes. You'll convey that information to the 4th umpire, who in turn will relay that info to the curator. The curator will then roll the pitch for 7 minutes using the heavy roller. When it comes to the timing permitted for these rolling, so I've just covered before the start of each innings. We'll get to, when we get to intervals, there's a 10-minute interval for the change of innings. That's where the rolling will take place. So between innings, there are 10 minutes. You can roll for a max of 7 minutes. But when it comes to rolling before the start of each subsequent day's play, when can that happen? The law guides us. The law tells us there is a window period for that rolling to take place. What is that window period? If our, let's say day 2 starts at 10 o'clock, the window period is between 9:30 and 9:50. So not more than 30 minutes and not less than 10 minutes before play is about to start. So anytime between 9:30 and 9:50 before the day's play, rolling to take place. And again, practically what happens before the day starts, Once the team gets to the field, the fourth umpire will go to the batting captain at the time. Will then ask the batting captain, do you want rolling? If yes, how long do you want rolling? And which roller do you want? So let's say the captain tells you big roller for 7 minutes. The fourth umpire will then relay that information to the curator, who will then roll the pitch for 7 minutes using the heavy roller. Again, the fourth umpire will supervise this rolling, and the fourth umpire will make sure that the rolling takes place within the window period. So usually we'll tell the curator to start rolling at 9:30, but anytime between 9:30 and 9:50, the rolling before the day's play is about to start can happen. Here are example of the 3 rollers. Top left is a hand roller. Bottom left is the medium roller. And on the right-hand side, that is the big roller. You'll ask usually you'll ask the curator of the stadium how many rollers they have available. Usually at international level, they do have 3 rollers available. At maybe some club grounds, they'll only have 1 or 2 rollers available. You need to find that out and give or relay those options to the batting captain. Are you allowed to water the pitch after the game has started? The law does not allow for the pitch to be watered after the game has started. Are you allowed to remark the creases? Yes, the law allows for remarking of creases, and this usually happens during the lunch and the tea interval. Batters batting on the crease, bowlers landing with the front foot, ball after ball, especially the popping crease, and sometimes they do disappear. The law allows for the remarking of creases. Are you allowed to maintain the footholds? Yes, the law allows for the foothold to be maintained, to be returf. You'll see in games of more than 1 day's duration, let's say in a test match, with bowlers landing on the same place with their front foot, ball after ball after ball. Many a times you'll find a hole developing. The law allows for those footholds to be maintained. At the end of the day, usually the ground staff will fix those footholds. So it's important that you allow those footholds to be fixed. It's important that a bowler needs to feel secure of where that front foot is landing. So you'll allow those footholds to be secured. Sometimes the use of sawdust is also allowed. You can throw a bit of sawdust down where the bowler's front foot is going to land. When it comes to covering the pitch, again, before the game has started, it's the ground authorities, it is their responsibility to make sure that the pitch is covered. But once the match has started, the law now guides us when it comes to covering the pitch. The law tells us that on each night of the match, the pitch needs to be covered. And during inclement weather, pitch also need to be covered. So in our test match, let's say on day 1, Monday, day 1, play starts at 10 o'clock, and let's say it ends at 5 o'clock. So the law tells us if footholds needs to be repaired, the ground staff will then repair the footholds if need be. The pitch then needs to be covered overnight. And if it rains, also needs to be covered. So what do we need to cover? Law tells us we need to cover the whole pitch and at least a minimum of 1.22 meters beyond the pitch at each end. Also, bowlers to run up, if you do have covers available, also needs to be covered. So this is all that the law tells us that that needs to be covered, but practically, and also there are playing conditions that allow. So so at many of the international grounds, at Newlands, for example, Newlands in Cape Town, South Africa, there are about 15, 16 strips on the square. Newlands has a huge square. So when it comes to covering the pitch, they don't just cover the match pitch. The whole square gets covered, as well as the bowlers' run-ups. When it comes to the removal of covers, the law tells us covers to be removed as soon as practicable on each day that play is expected to take place. In the previous slide, we said at the end of the day's play overnight, the pitch needs to be covered, and practically they don't just cover the pitch, but they actually cover the whole square, as well as the bowlers' run-ups. So now the next morning, when do you need to remove those covers? There's not an exact time according to the law. All the law tells us is, as soon as practicable, please remove the covers. Also, if you do decide, if it's raining and the pitch needs to be covered, as soon as it stopped raining, you then need to remove the covers. Different grounds have different methods of how they cover. I'm going to show you a few examples. This is Nottingham in England, where they use this hover thing where they cover the main pitch with this, and you'll see next to the sides there's also covering, so they'll cover the rest of the square with those covers. I'm going to play you a video now.
This is the scene at Trent Bridge, Nottingham. Second day, game between Nottinghamshire and Durham. As I speak, it started to rain. Special cover was being brought into play and brought to the centre to cover the wicket. Cover the whole of the wicket. Although it's daytime, the lights are on, which just assists the batsman's view a little. Players trudge off into the pavilion. Some of the members have already got their umbrellas up. So this is rather a disconsolate scene, as this light drizzle has been falling since the start of play has got a little heavier. We all hope that it won't last for very long. So this is that's the county hall with a green roof, the headquarters of the Nottinghamshire County Council, and over there is the world-renowned, as it said on it, Trent Bridge Inn. So, it's Michael Parkinson saying cheerio for now.
You do find some grounds, like this ground in Sri Lanka, where they actually cover the whole field. It just depends on the grounds, but some grounds, as you can see here, they do cover the whole ground. The final law that I'm covering this evening is interval. So according to the laws of cricket, what is classified as an interval? So the following are classified as scheduled intervals. The period between close of play on day 1 and the start of the next day's play, that is seen as a scheduled interval. So in our test match, day 1 starts at 10 o'clock and our day ends at 5 o'clock. Day 2 will now start at 10 o'clock. So the time between 5 o'clock on day 1 and 10 o'clock on day 2, that is seen in the law as a scheduled interval. It is a long interval, but it is an interval. Interval between innings is also seen by the law as a scheduled interval. Interval for meals, those are your tea time and your lunch time, also seen as a scheduled interval. Interval for drinks, and then lastly, any other agreed interval. So for most of these intervals, the governing body of cricket for that particular competition, they decide the duration of these intervals. For Test match cricket, the International Cricket Council is the governing body. And when it comes to your interval between innings, it is 10 minutes. You'll also see in the next slide, the law also show that the interval between innings is 10 minutes. So interval between innings is specific 10 minutes. Your interval for meals, governing body decided that your lunch interval will be 40 minutes and your tea interval in Test match cricket is 20 minutes. Your interval for drinks, governing body decide that drinks intervals in Test match cricket will be 4 minutes. And then any other agreed interval, an example of this, many years ago, the late Queen decided to visit, I think it was the 4th Ashes Test match between England and Australia. And the only time that she said she was available to come and greet the players was at 11:30. That was the only time she said she was available, with play starting at 10:30. So what they did was, on day 1, with the Queen coming at 11:30, play started on time at 10:30. They played for an hour. Then there was an agreed interval of 15 minutes from 11:30 till 11:45, where the Queen came on, late Queen came onto the field and greeted the players. That is just an example of an agreed interval before the game started. When the Queen came to greet the players. So when it comes to the duration of the intervals, law does not put a specific time on the duration for the lunch or the tea interval. This is where the governing body comes in, and the International Cricket Council, they decided that your lunch interval is 40 minutes and your tea interval is 20 minutes. So it varies from competition to competition. Yes, most countries, they do follow the same duration for their intervals, where in South Africa as well, in our 4-day competition, we also have a 40-minute lunch and a 20-minute tea. But I do know there are countries that sometimes have a 30-minute lunch and a 20 tea. It just depends on the country. Law doesn't tell you how long your interval should be. That's up to the governing body. All the law tells us is that whatever duration you decide for your interval to be, that duration shall start from the call of time before the intervals started until the call of play on the resumption of the interval. I'll give an example to illustrate what the law is trying to tell us. Next week, Monday, we will cover how do you announce play to start, when do you call time. So one of the instances where time is, and I'll use our test match as an example. Our test match starts at 10 o'clock. Before the first ball is about to be bowled, the bowler's in umpire needs to call play, and then the first ball will be bowled. Test match cricket has 2-hour sessions, so from 10 o'clock till 12 o'clock. So when we get to 12 o'clock, at the end of the over, it's now 12 o'clock. The bowler's in umpire then needs to call over, time, and lunch. So if it's 12 o'clock that the bowler's in umpire call time for lunch, what time will play restart after lunch, seeing that lunch should be 40 minutes? At 12:40, the first ball needs to be bowled after lunch. I'll use another example. It's hardly ever, 99% of the time, you hardly ever stop at exactly 12 o'clock. Again, next week, we'll see what happens if we get to 12 o'clock and we've bowled 4 balls in the over. Do we stop? Do we go off? We'll see next week. I'll just give you a glimpse. No, we don't go off. We need to complete the over first, unless something happens, but we'll get there next week. So we first need to complete the over. So now it's 12 o'clock. We're in the fourth ball of the over. So we first need to complete the over. So we'll bowl a further 2 more balls. And let's say at 12:02, the interval at the over's done. So now it's 12 minutes past 2. It's now time for lunch. The bowler's in umpire will now call over, time, and lunch. So 12:02, the session ended. What time do we restart after lunch? Taking into account, lunch is 40 minutes. That is correct. The first ball needs to be bowled at 12:42. So the law tells us whatever duration for the interval you decide, but that duration will be from as soon as you call time, and should be play should resume 40 minutes later. So in our last example, because we call time 12:02, the first ball needs to be bowled at 12:42. Same principle apply to the T interval. I mentioned in the previous slide that the interval between innings is 10 minutes. So if South Africa gets bowled out at 11:10, what time will India go out to bat? At 11:20. And in that 10 minutes, what will happen? We've just heard in the previous slides also, rolling needs to take place in that 10 minutes if the batting captain wants rolling to take place. It's the batting captain's prerogative. Most of the time they do opt for rolling, but there are instances where the batting captain decides not to roll. It is his or her prerogative. The option is there. They don't have to exercise the option. If they decide, no, we don't want any rolling, no issue at all. If they do decide they want rolling, you need to ask how long. And we know it's a max of 7 minutes. And you need to just ask which rollers. And if there's 3 available, you need to give those options to the batting captain at the time. So interval between innings at 10 minutes. So let's say India gets bowled out at 10:29. The first ball to South Africa needs to be bowled at 10:39. So the next slides will cover where the law allows us to do certain things to save some time. For many years, the law was quite rigid where, let's say your lunch is at 12 o'clock and no matter what happens, we'll take lunch at exactly 12 o'clock. Let's say tea is at 3 o'clock. No matter what happens, tea will be exactly 3 o'clock. But lawmakers, saw there are things that happens in the game where we can save a bit of time. We're going to go through examples now. We're going to start with change of innings, how we can save a bit of time. We'll then move on to lunchtime, incidents that happened during play where we can take an early lunch to save a bit of time, to maximize play. We'll also then go to tea time where things happen on the field. We can then take early tea or we can delay tea to maximize play. So let's start with the change of innings and what the lawmakers decide you can do to play around with the 10-minute change of innings, or to not allow the 10-minute change of innings to maximize play. The first instance is, so if an innings ends with 10 minutes or less remaining before the agreed close of play, there will be no play further on that day. It will be stumps on that day. I'll give an example to illustrate what point number 1 is trying to tell us. At 5 o'clock is our game starts at 10 o'clock on day 1. 5 o'clock is our cutoff time. At 16:51, South Africa gets dismissed. Now remember, it's now 16:51. Our close of play is 1700. So what happens next? So we know there's a change of innings should now happen, and a change of innings usually is 10 minutes. So now, if we take a change of innings of 10 minutes from 16:51 till 17:01, we technically pass our 5 o'clock cutoff time. So now what the lawmaker tell us, if an innings ends when 10 minutes or less remains before the close of play time, like in our example, 16:51, this is 10 minutes or less. This is actually 9 minutes before the close of play. It will be the end of play for that particular day. Let's say day 1. It will be stumps for day 1. The lawmakers went further by saying, yes, I know we ended 9 minutes earlier, but we will not start in this instance 9 minutes earlier the following day. Another example, South Africa gets bowled out at 16:57. What happens next? Because this is 10 minutes or less, or this is now less than 10 minutes before the agreed close of play, it will be stumps or end of day's play. Last example, let's say South Africa gets bowled out at 16:48. What happens next? Can we apply point number 1? No, we cannot apply point number 1. Why? Because point number 1 tells us an innings it needs to end 10 minutes or less. 16:48 is 12 minutes to go till the close of play. So what do we do now? We now need to have a 10-minute change of innings from 16:48 till 16:58. So during that 10-minute change of innings, we'll ask the batting captain if he or she wants rolling and which roller, and that first ball needs to be bowled at 16:58. Another instance where there is a change of innings happening and where the lawmakers decided we can save a bit of time. What is that instance? If a captain declares an innings or forfeits an innings, we will next week get to when a captain can declare, what is a declaration, when a captain can forfeit an innings. So if a captain declares an innings in whether it's an interruption or scheduled interval of more than 10 minutes duration, what we will then do is we will incorporate the change of innings interval into that either interruption or interval. I'll use an example to illustrate what point number 2 is telling us. So in our test match, let's say it's now day number 3, started at 10 o'clock. At 12 o'clock, India is 509 for the loss of 4 wickets. We now 12 o'clock. The umpire looks at his or her watch, sees it's 12 o'clock, calls over time and lunch. Players leave the field at exactly 12. When will play restart after lunch? At 12:40, that first ball needs to be bowled. So India now at lunchtime, 509 for 4. At 12:15, while you are having lunch, the Indian captain knocks on the door and informs you, umpire, we are declaring. This is now at 12:15. When will play restart? 12:40. So 12:15. So now captain of India declared. South Africa now needs to go bat, and we now know once one captain declares, there should be now a change of innings. We now know a change of innings is 10 minutes. But we're still during our lunch interval. So now the law allows that 10-minute change of innings to be incorporated into the lunch time. So you now won't now add another 10 minutes to have a change of innings interval. There's enough time during your lunch interval. So what practically will now happen is, excuse me, you'll immediately go to the South African captain, informing him or her that India has declared, and then you'll ask, do you want rolling, yes or no? If yes, you'll relay that message to the fourth umpire, who will then supervise the rolling, and the first ball in the South African innings will be bowled at 12:40. So what I'm trying to prove with this example is there was a change of innings during our lunch interval, and we then incorporated the 10-minute change of innings into the lunch interval. But there's a but. If, let's say, we've now just heard we can incorporate the change of innings into the lunch interval, but let's say the Indian captain came to the umpires at 12:35. Now informing the umpires, I am declaring. So what happens next? Now the law guides us here by telling us, yes, we took lunch at 12 o'clock. We're supposed to restart at 12:40. But now there's been a declaration of 12 at 12:35. We've just heard that if there is a declaration during lunch, we can incorporate it into the lunch interval. But in this case, if the declaration happens with less than 10 minutes remaining of the lunch interval, in our example, there's only 5 minutes left. So you cannot expect the now South African openers in 5 minutes to suddenly pad up, be ready. Also, because there's a change of innings, the batting captain has the option to roll. So now you still need to go to the batting captain, ask captain, do you want rolling? Yes, yes or no? And if yes, which roller? And they can have rolling for a max of 7 minutes. So in this instance, if the declaration is 10 minutes or less before the interval is at its end, we need to give the opposing captain the 10 minutes change of innings interval. So in our example, 12:35, the declaration came. The first ball needs to be bowled at 12:45. But if there's more than 10 minutes of the interval left and there is a declaration, we'll incorporate it into the lunch or the tea interval. Same principle will apply to tea. I just use lunch as an example. So this is an example when it comes to the change of innings interval, how you can save a bit of time and maximize play. Another change that the lawmakers did, again to maximize play, they put this clause in the law book where they say, if at any time during the match you lose playing time due to adverse conditions. The law allows the lunch or the tea interval to be changed if the two umpires and both captains agree. Excuse me. So at any time during the game, you can reschedule your lunch or your tea interval if there are adverse conditions around, if both umpires and both captains agree. The next slide is where when it comes to the lunch interval, if something happens where the law actually dictates to you, if this particular thing happened, you need to take an early lunch. In this instance, you don't need the agreement or agreement of both captains. Usually, if you do want to change the agree times for your intervals, you need both captains to agree. But in the following instances, when it comes to lunch and your tea interval, the law actually tell us in these two instances when it comes to lunch, and we'll have 4 instances when it comes to the tea interval, where you actually do not need the captains to agree. Law tell us if these things happen, you will take an early lunch. So let's have a look at lunchtime. What is that first instance that will happen when you can take an early lunch? So law tell us if an innings ends 10 minutes or less before the agreed time for lunch, you will take the lunch interval immediately. That 10-minute change of innings interval will then be incorporated into the lunch interval. I'll use an example to illustrate what point number 1 is telling us. So in our test match, lunch is at 12 o'clock. At 11:52, South Africa gets dismissed. What happens? We know lunch is at 12, but now this is 11:52. Can we take an early lunch? Or do we need to play till 12? What happens next? Point number 1 is where law actually guides us. Law tells us, law dictates. If an innings ends when 10 minutes or less, in our example, the innings ended 11:52. That's 8 minutes to lunch. So it is 10 minutes or less. We need to take an early lunch. We don't need agreement of any captains or anyone. We will take an early lunch. Law tell us. So we will at 11:52, as soon as that 10th wicket fell, we will then take lunch. What time will we restart after the lunch interval? We've just heard in our second slide when we dealt with the intervals that the law tell us the interval needs to be your agree time. What is the agree time for the lunch interval as per the International Cricket Council? 40 minutes. So if we took lunch at 11:52, what time must the first ball be bowled after the lunch interval to South Africa? Or to India? Let's say South Africa was dismissed. First ball needs to be bowled 40 minutes later, which is 12:32. Lunch will then be from 11:52 till 12:32, 40 minutes lunch. So during the lunchtime, the 10-minute change of innings will be incorporated into the lunchtime. Also, practically what you'll do is you'll then go, let's say South Africa was dismissed, you'll then go to the Indian captain and ask, Captain, do you want rolling? If yes, how long? And which roller you want to be used. You'll then relay that message to the 4th umpire, who in turn will relay it to the curator. So that's what point number 1 tells us. 10 minutes or less, if an innings ends, you will take an early lunch. But it must be 10 minutes or less. If an innings should end 11:48, what happens next? This is not 10 minutes or less to go to lunch. So here we can either go to this clause where if the captains both agree to take an early lunch, we can. No agreement. Because this is not 10 minutes or less to go to lunch, it's 11:48. We will now have to take a 10-minute change of innings interval from 11:48 till 11:58. Another instance where something happens where law dictates to you, you don't need any permission from anyone. If this happens, you will take an early lunch. And what is this? If due to adverse conditions of either can be ground, weather, or light, or exceptional circumstances, a stoppage occurs with 10 minutes or less. Let's say usually it's rain, 99% of the time. Let's say it rains 10 minutes or less before lunch. What do? You will take an early lunch. So at 11:51, it starts to rain. What do? Because this is 10 minutes, this is less than 10 minutes to lunch. Now law dictates we will take an early lunch. Excuse me, lunch will then be from 11:51. And if conditions permit, when will the first ball have to be bowled after the lunch interval? That is correct, 40 minutes later. So at 12:31, the first ball needs to be bowled, obviously, if conditions permitted. If it's still raining at 12:51, obviously you cannot then restart at 12:51. But if it cleared, that first ball needs to be bowled at 12:31. So when it comes to lunch, where the law dictates us, if an innings ends 10 minutes or less, you'll take an early lunch. If it rains 10 minutes or less, you'll take an early lunch. When it comes to your tea interval, again, this is what the lawmakers did, where they try to maximize time. Let's look at the first instance. So when it comes to your tea interval, here the lawmakers tell us that if an innings ends with 30 minutes or less before the agreed time for the tea interval, you shall take your tea interval immediately. So same principle applies here as we did with lunch when an innings ends. That's the difference here. When it comes to lunchtime was 10 minutes or less if an innings ends. When it comes to the tea interval, 30 minutes or less if an innings ends, you'll take an early tea. I'll use just an example to illustrate this. Let's say our tea is at 3 o'clock. At 14:35, India gets dismissed. What happens next? So law tell us, because this is 30 minutes or less before the agreed time of tea of 3 o'clock, we will take an early tea. Tea will then be of the agreed duration. How long is tea as per the International Cricket Council? 20 minutes. So because we took an early tea at 14:35, tea will be from 14:35, and the first ball needs to be bowled at 14:55. We will then include the 10-minute change of innings interval into the tea interval. Point number 2, again to maximize play, law tell us, so when 30 minutes remains before the agreed time for tea, an interval between innings is already in progress. Play needs to resume at the end of the 10-minute interval. I'll use an example to illustrate what point number 2 is trying to tell us. Let's say our tea is at 3 o'clock. At 14:25, South Africa gets bowled out. Can we take an early tea? If we look at point number 1 says 30 minutes or less. So we cannot use clause or point number 1 because we are now 35 minutes to go to tea. So we cannot take point number 1. So it's 35 minutes to tea. Now law tell us that we will now at 14:25, we will now take a 10-minute change of innings interval, and the first ball needs to be bowled at 14:35. And we'll play from 14:35 until 3 o'clock when we will take our tea at the usual time. So what happens if it rains? Or it doesn't have to be rain, but it usually, I'll let you use rain as an example, but the law covers everything. It says adverse conditions of ground, weather, or light. If a stoppage occurs with 30 minutes or less before the agreed time for tea, you will take an early tea. So an example to illustrate this, our tea starts at 3 o'clock. At 14:40, it starts to rain. Because it's 30 minutes or less before the agreed time for tea, we can use this clause and take an early tea. So tea will now be from at 14:40, and tea will be 40 minutes. Tea will be 20 minutes. First ball needs to be bowled at 3 o'clock, whether conditions permitting. So point number 1 and 3, when it comes to changing your time intervals for tea, you'll see it's almost exactly as for the lunch interval. The only difference is lunch is if an innings ends 10 minutes, if it rains 10 minutes before lunch, we'll take an early lunch. Tea time is just 30 minutes. If an innings ends 30 minutes to tea, we'll take an early tea. If it rains 30 minutes or less to the tea interval, we'll take an early tea. Again, to maximize time when it comes to your tea interval. So point number 4 is telling us is our tea is at 3 o'clock. A stoppage is already in progress when we get to 30 minutes before the agreed time for tea. So what do? Here, law tell us we will bring tea forward by 30 minutes. I'll use an example to illustrate this, our tea being at 3 o'clock. It starts raining at 14:20. What happens next? Can we take an early tea when it starts to rain at 14:20? No, we cannot take an early tea because point 3 in the previous slide said to us, it needs to be 30 minutes or less. Because it's now 40 minutes to go till tea, we cannot take an early tea. So now it starts raining at 2:20. So when we get to 14:30, now it is half an hour to tea. Now the law tells us, because we now half an hour until tea, we can now take an early tea. We bring tea forward. We will take tea from 14:30 up until 14:50, 20-minute tea interval. And if conditions permit, first ball after tea to be bowled at 14:50. Another time-saving mechanism that the lawmakers brought into the laws. And this applies to the lunch and the tea interval. 9 wickets down at lunch or tea. So over the years, the lawmakers saw that when it comes to the 10th wicket, the batting ability of the lower order is not as good as the top order, and usually the number 11 batsman does not last that long. I know there are some very good number 11 batters out there, but most of them do struggle with the bat. They are usually the bowlers, the in the side to bowl, and so they usually struggle with the bat. But no disrespect to those great number 11 batters out there. I know there are a few. So to save time, and the lawmakers know that the number 11 batter doesn't usually last that long. So when either at lunchtime or at tea time, when you get to your lunchtime or your tea time and the side is 9 wickets down, what happens next? To save time, the lawmakers decided when you get to your lunch, and I'll use lunch interval as an example, but the same principle will apply to your tea interval. So let's use lunch. Our lunch is at 12 o'clock. South Africa is 200 for the loss of 9 wickets. You look at your watch, you see it's now 12 o'clock. The final ball gets bowled, and it is now 12 o'clock. South Africa is 200 for 9. What happens next? We've just heard in previous slides that when you get to 12 o'clock, you need to take lunch. But in this particular law, again to save time, because South Africa is 9 wickets down, and to save time and to maximize play, the law now allows the lunch interval or the session to be extended. You can now delay your lunch interval by a max of 30 minutes. I'll give examples to illustrate what the lawmakers are trying to tell us. So if a side is 9 down, they must be 9 wickets down, either lunch or tea. You then allowed by law, don't need to ask permission of any captain, law tells you, if a side is 9 down, when you get to your lunch interval, you delay your lunch interval up until a max of 30 minutes. So in our example, South Africa, day 2, we get to 12 o'clock, they 200 for 9. Final ball now gets bowled. Do we take lunch at 12 o'clock? No. Point number 7 tell us, because SA is 9 down, we need to extend lunch by a max of 30 minutes. So now we play on, and let's say at 10 past 12, the 10th wicket gets taken. So what happens now? South Africa is now bowled out at 12:10. Now we will take lunch. How long will our lunch be? 40 minutes. When will the first ball be bowled after lunch? At 12:50, the first ball will be bowled. There'll be a change of innings during the lunch interval. That 10-minute change of innings will be incorporated into our lunch interval. We will go to the batting captain, let's say India. We'll ask, do you want rolling? If yes, how long and which roller? So that is how what point number 7 is trying to tell us, what the lawmakers is trying to do, how to maximize play when it comes to your lunch or your TD interval if a side is 9 wickets down. But remember I said up to a max of 30 minutes. So what happens if the bowling side cannot take the 10th wicket? And this law only allows you to play a max of 30 minutes extra when it comes to your lunch or your tea to allow the fielding side to see if they can take the 10th wicket. So now you get to 12:30 and the bowling side could not take the 10th wicket. What do? When you get to 12:30 and the final ball gets bowled, you will now take lunch. Lunch will then be 40 minutes from 12:30 up until 13:10. First ball needs to be bowled at 13:10 with the last 2 batters of South Africa coming out to bat. So just to summarize this, and I forgot to mention this yesterday, but I'm going to mention it now. In these slides today and going forward, once you see these green highlighted text, there is an exam question on this. So in your exam, there will be a question on 9 wickets down. In previous slides, there are also, you'll see green text. You do have the slides. You can look at it at your own time. Everywhere where you see the green text, there is an exam question based on it. So I'm giving you a free point here. There is a question in the exam on 9 wickets down. So just to summarize again, when you get to 12 o'clock and South Africa's 9 wickets down, you don't take lunch. You'll extend lunch up to a max of 30 minutes. If they do take the wicket, like in my example at 10 past, you'll take lunch at 10 past. Lunch will be 40 minutes. Play will restart at 12:50. If the fielding side cannot take the lunch, take the final wicket, you allow them a max of 30 minutes. So by 12:30, they could not take the 10th wicket. You'll take lunch at 12:30, and play will resume at 13:10. Interval for drinks. All the law tell us when it comes to a drinks interval, and again, you'll see there's the last sentence is highlighted in green. So there is an exam question on the drinks interval. So all the law tell us is when it comes to drinks interval, not to exceed 5 minutes. The International Cricket Council for Test Cricket decided that the drinks interval at Test match level should be 4 minutes. Law doesn't tell us how long your drink should be. All they tell you is not more than 5 minutes. Also, again, a time-saving mechanism that the lawmakers brought into the game is, so in Test match cricket, they have 3 sessions of 2 hours each. So our first session starts at 10, lunch is at 12 o'clock. In the middle of the session, which is 11 o'clock, there'll be a 4 minutes drinks interval. So from 11 till 11:04, there'll be a 4 minutes drinks interval. So the lawmakers decided again to maximize play. If a wicket falls within 5 minutes, it's either a wicket or a batter retires within 5 minutes of the drinks interval, you will then take the drinks interval immediately. I'll use an example to illustrate this. Drinks is at 11 o'clock, from 11 till 11:04 in our test match. At 10:56, a batter is dismissed. What happens next? Because this is within 5 minutes to drinks, we will take an early drinks from 10:56 till 11 o'clock, a 4-minute drink interval. But it must be either wicket falls or battery tires, but it must be within 5 minutes of the drinks interval. If it's not within 5 minutes of the drinks interval, let's say at 10:54 a wicket falls. What you then do is, because this is not within 5 minutes, you cannot take an early drinks. Drinks now, you will then will allow the incoming batter to come face the next ball. It must be within 5 minutes of the drinks interval. The last slide that I'm covering for this evening before I hand over to Tom, and then we'll open the floor for Q&A. Law guidance when it comes to interval for drinks. When it comes to the last hour, and next week we'll handle the last hour, we are not allowed to take a drinks interval during the last hour of the match. And lastly, if at any time you do decide to take, whether it's an early lunch, an early tea, or please inform the scorers of these changes to the hours of play. They part of our team. We one team, umpires and scorers. If you do decide to take an early tea or a lunch, just pop into the scorers and say, scorers, we are taking an early lunch or tea, or whatever changes gets done to the times of the day or of the match. Please inform the scorers. Tom, thank you so much. That is my laws for this evening. I'm handing back over to you.
Thank you so much, Abdullah. The intervals law, always intricate, perfectly explained by you as usual. So thank you for that bit of expertise. We are now going to move on to our question and answer session for this evening. At the moment, I see 3 questions in the chat box. We will go through the questions in the chat box first, and then we will come to the hands that are up in the meeting room. I've posted a new link for downloading the presentation. So use the one that I have put in the chat box at 19:17 South African time, and you should be able to download the presentation from there. Francis asks, in the covering of the pitch, do we include the bowler's run-ups, Abdullah?
Yes, the law allows for the bowlers run-ups to be covered. Many playing conditions across many of the competitions across the world also wants the bowlers run-ups to be covered. Bowlers their run-ups needs to be secure. They needs to be while running in, be stable underfoot. So yes, bowlers run-ups needs to be covered, but that's at a high level of cricket, test match, provincial level. At many club grounds, you will often find just the match pitch being covered. If there are no bowling or covers at your club ground or at the ground that you going to officiate, no issue. They don't have it in place. They only have covers to let's say maybe only the match pitch or the square. No issue to that.
Thanks, Tula. Tapiwa has got a question related to rolling during an interval. So when there is a tea interval, let us assume there was a declaration during the tea interval, and the batters for the team coming into bat ask for rolling of the pitch. He says, if the rolling ends 10 minutes from time, is there a grace period of getting out of the roller and the and the batters entering the field? Or do we have to wait until the rolling is complete before restarting play? Tapiwa, your question is not very clear. Maybe I can rephrase it or give a different scenario. So say, Abdullah, our tea time is from 1440 until 1500, and the declaration is at 1455, and the new batting captain asks for a 7-minute roll. What would happen then, and when would play restart? Normally play should restart at 3 p.m. 1500 after tea.
So Tapiwa, thanks for your question. So play our tea interval is from 1400 to 1440 till 1500. At 1455, the batting captain declares. Now there's only 5 minutes of the tea interval left, but now the law allows now the 10-minute change of innings interval will kick into effect. Usually, if there's a change of innings during an interval, whether it's a lunch or your tea, we'll try to incorporate the change of innings into the lunch or the tea interval. But in this case, because there are less than 10 minutes to go when there was the declaration, you now need to take the 10-minute change of innings interval. Why is this the case? Because what needs to happen, the batting captain has the right. The law allows the batting captain rolling. So you will now need to go to the batting captain, inform him or her that there's been a declaration and whether he or she wants rolling or not. And usually they take rolling, and let's say yes, they tell you yes. You will then need to relay that info to the curator, telling the curator, captain, this change of innings, captain wants rolling, max 7 minutes, big roller. So you will allow that rolling to take place. That's why there's going to be a change of innings interval from 1455 up until 1505. First ball needs to be bowled at 1505. That 10-minute change of innings will now allow rolling to take place, and it will give enough time for the openers to go paired up. Over, Tom.
Thanks, Dula. Next question is from Louis. For the purposes of the online level 1 exam, is it okay to only learn the pitch dimensions in meters and not in yards? So Louis, the exam is a true or false or multiple choice questions. There's 69 questions. And so you don't actually have to memorize any dimension, because there will be options for you to choose from. And the options will include meters and yards. So as long as you know that a length of a pitch is 20.12 meters, then you will be able to see that option and pick that option. Don't pick the 25-meter option. Don't pick the 18-meter option. Pick the 20.12 meter option. And it will also have flash 22 yards. So you will see the numbers, and hopefully you'll recognize the correct answers. Viswa, your question is not really complete. About mowing the grass every day during the test match on each morning. That's what you've written.
Yeah.
Please go ahead and tell us what you are trying to ask.
Let's assume England and South Africa are playing a match in England, and the day one, the grass is at maybe 5 or 6 millimeters on the pitch. The next morning, it has to maintain the same length, right? So who will maintain or who will govern the length? What if it is cut short? Will that not be considered as altering the playing conditions?
Abdullah, you want to take that one? as to what the
Yeah.
groundsman does?
Yes, Viswa, a very important role of the fourth umpire in the test match is to go and check the length of the grass cutter of the pitch. On the grass cutter, there's usually a pin. You set it on, let's say there's 5 settings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If the curator used length number 4, you take out the pin, it will then stay at level number 4. And that would make sure that you keep the pin as the fourth umpire, and that makes sure that the grass cutter stays on level 4 for the duration of the test match. So yes, you bring up a very important point, and that's where the fourth umpire plays a crucial role. A fourth umpire needs to go check it, needs to get that pin, needs to make sure that the length of the level of that cutter is exactly the same for the duration of the test match.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Perfect. Thanks, Viswa. Tabiso, I have reposted the link to download the presentation, so you may all post as download it as required. Question from Yanita is related to yesterday's law. That's fine. Do we need to know the details of the dimensions and weights of balls and bats for the exams? So Yanita, I've just gone back to the slides that were presented yesterday. And for the balls, you do not need to know the weights and the dimensions. You do need to know when a new ball becomes available. That is highlighted in green. So when you download the presentation, remember to focus on the slides that have green text. And in lecture 7, Abdullah is going to go through only the slides in the presentation that have green text. And then when it comes to the bat, we do need to know the length of the bat. I will remind you, it's in slide 48. The maximum length of the bat from the top to the bottom is 96.52 centimeters. Again, remember, you don't need to memorize this number. You just need to remember that it is plus minus 96 centimeters, because it will be a multiple choice question. There will be, I think, 4 different options to choose from. One will be 100 centimeters, one
Thank you, guys. Am I audible?
Yes, loud and clear. Go
Okay,
ahead.
thank you. Outside the normal interval laws, you always see players running up, bringing the batting side water or new gloves, or even if somebody gets injured and they need to quickly have some whatever rubbed on or whatever. Is there a time limit that those people are allowed to interrupt the play? Because sometimes you'll see the umpire walks over to them and starts actually telling them, okay, you need to, is there a law or a rule or a regulation that they have a limited time to be on the pitch?
Great question, Alicia. I'm going to hand that one over to our law specialist, Abdullah. And you can refer to the ICC regulations, please.
Thanks for your question. Alisa, yes, we get guided by the ICC. So when it comes to an injury of a player, whether it's a fielder or a batter, you'll often find as you've seen on TV, they do have physios available. So you'll see the physio running up. So the ICC guided us by telling us 4 minutes. That is the time limit that you give them.
Mm-hmm.
So usually you'll see the umpire standing one side. They'll hover around there, but they'll let the physio do what the physio needs to do. And the TV umpire is the timekeeper in test matches. So the TV umpire will have a stopwatch. The
Okay.
TV umpire will then, let's say after a minute, the TV umpire will relay 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. So the on-field umpires exactly, they know how long the duration is. You'll probably see them after 3 minutes moving closer to the injured player and informing the physio, you've got a minute left. You now need to decide you get done with the treatment or the player needs to leave the field.
Okay. And then, sorry, I just got another quick question.
Mm-hmm.
The boundaries, is there a difference or is there a law or a regulation that says how far the boundaries must be, especially for us women versus the men, or is it just one standard measurement? Because sometimes you see the boundaries are brought in.
Yes, there is a difference in the playing conditions. There's nothing in the law that covers it. When it comes to men's cricket, the International Cricket Council gives us guidelines by telling us when it comes to maximum length is 82.43 meters and minimum is 59 point something. I can't know exact. 59.43 and 82.28, I think. That's for men's cricket. They do give you minimum and max. They do tell you if the ground has been international cricket, a ground that's hosted international cricket for many a year, and it is a fairly small ground, like in New Zealand. They don't comply with those. They do have very small grounds, but these grounds has been hosting international cricket for many years. They don't need to comply with these regulations because they've been hosting international cricket for many years. That is for men's cricket. For women's cricket, it is definitely smaller. Tom, I can't remember what those dimensions are.
It is a minimum of 54.6 meters and a maximum of 65 meters. So tomorrow for the third Women's One Day International between South Africa and Sri Lanka, the boundary is 60 meters all the way around the field. So that is within that bracket of 55 to 65 minimum and maximum.
Okay, thank you, guys.
You are welcome. Next hand up is Jagadisan. Jagadisan, please unmute your microphone. The floor is yours.
Dear all, good evening. My question is about bails. Okay, it's mentioned like whenever there is a windy and it's not, so we have to remove both the bails, both set of bails, right? So
Yes.
suppose when the team batting first, it was windy and we have removed the bails. Okay, so when during the second innings, actually the condition back to normal. Now is it advisable to bring back the bails?
Jagadisan,
Yeah.
we need to see what the law says, and the law tells us that as soon as conditions are allowing for bails to be put back onto the top of the stumps, then bails should be put back onto the top of the stumps. Yes, that means it was different in the morning than it is to the afternoon. But if you think about it, weather conditions change. The ball might swing in the morning and it might not swing in the afternoon. It might rain in the morning. It might be sunny in the afternoon. So the fact of the matter is you always need to have bails on the stumps if the wind allows, so that you have the best possible conditions at all times. If the wind doesn't allow, then the bails must be off. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. Thanks, Tom. And one more thing, one more question from my end.
Sure.
It's regarding rolling. Okay, so I mean, between this is one innings is completed. So and the batting team captain asking for 7 minutes rolling for heavy roller. Okay, so it is done. So after rolling, we had an interruption. Say it's raining. Okay, for 1 hour interruption is there. Acceptable?
So the now batting team, they did exercise option to roll. So there was a change of innings. The law allows when after the game is started for rolling to be done when there's a change of innings, and also each subsequent day's play, they do the 3, the 4, and the 5 in a test match. So there was an innings change. They exercised the option to roll. Now there was the rain interruption. So they had the rolling, they exercised the option. If there is a request to have rolling again, you should deny that request, because they, at the change of innings interval, they exercise their option to roll.
Thanks, Abdullah. And one more thing, for example, in a 5-day test match, the second day before the start of the play, will the batting team who are going to come, they will ask for the roller, or is it like we have to follow the standard procedure? Did you get my question, or can I rephrase
yes,
it? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll answer your question by the use of a practical example, how it happens in practice. You can then let me know if I answered your question. So, in a test match, the morning of day 2, the fourth umpire is usually there much earlier than the rest of the team, because there's lots of duties that the fourth umpire needs to take care of. So part of the duties that the fourth umpire needs to do is the batting captain at the morning of day 2. The fourth umpire needs to go to the batting captain. Ask the batting captain, do you want rolling? If yes, how long and which roller you want. That information then gets relayed to the curator, and the fourth umpire needs to supervise the rolling. So practically what happens, fourth umpire needs to go to the batting captain. So usually what happens, fourth umpire is there early on the ground, the both sides would come onto the field, or sometimes they'll go to the nets. So if the batting captain is at the nets at the time, a fourth umpire will then go to the nets to ask the batting captain if they want rolling, how long and which roller. If they're doing fielding drills on the field, the fourth umpire will then just walk over to the batting captain at the time and ask whether they want rolling or not. That is how it practically works in test match cricket as well as provincial cricket. Did I answer your question?
Yes, Abdullah. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, both.
Thanks, Jagadisan. Next hand up is Sandeep Mehta. Sandeep, please unmute your microphone. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Abdullah, for your time. Okay, my question was regarding the multi-day games. Do the local governing bodies have any say in telling that, okay, whether the lawn would be moved every day because, let's say, it's hot today, we shouldn't be doing this, or is it mandatory to cut the lawn or cut the grass to the specified length what we decided on the first day every day? in that as well?
Abdullah, does the BCCI decide whether or not the outfield is going to be cut in a test match on day 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5?
No, the governing body does not have any say. We get guided by the laws, and the playing conditions are this, and the law is very clear. The pitch and the outfield shall be mowed on each day that play is expected to take place. Day 2, day 3, day 4, and day 5. Fourth umpire needs to supervise this. Fourth umpire will make sure that the grass cutter is the same length throughout the test match. Similarly with the grass, the outfield cutter, fourth umpire also needs to supervise that. But to answer your question, Sandeep, governing body has absolutely no say. Once that match has started, before the game has started, nothing can be done. The curator, the ground authority, if the governing body wants to do something, nothing can be done before the game has started. But once the game has started, law kicks in, and law wants that pitch and the outfield to be mowed. And one of the big reason is the lawmakers want to try to keep conditions exactly the same over the span of the test match. That is one of the big reasons why they want the pitch to be cut, why they want the outfield to be cut. Did I answer your question, Sandeep?
Just one, maybe a follow-up thing, maybe. So basically, if the playing conditions say before the start of the match or the series that it can be avoided or we could forego that thing, so that is a possibility. If the playing conditions suggest that, okay, local for that particular tournament or for that particular series.
Tom, did you hear the question? You was breaking up on my side.
Sorry, I'll repeat again. So let's say if the playing conditions suggest before the start of the series or the match that we could forego based on, let's say it's very hot today or whatever, let's say before the match begins. So it's a possibility, right? Or no, we cannot do that. We have to follow the law only.
No, before the game starts, Sandeep, it's up to the curator. The curator can do whatever he or she wants to prepare the pitch and the outfield for the test match. We have absolutely no say how long should roll, how long they should cut, what they can do. Then supervise whether it's
Thanks, Abdullah. Thanks, Sandeep. Next hand up is Mohammed Faisal. Mohammed, please unmute your microphone. The floor is yours.
Good evening, gents. On the length of the pitch, I don't know if in provincial games or international, if the pitch is too short or too long, do you still play on with both the captain's agreements, or do you call the game off?
Sorry, Mohammed, did you ask about international cricket or
the pitch length?
yes?
Right? If you measure the pitch and say it's short to international standards, or it's too long, do you still continue the game with the captain's agreements, or do you call the game off or realign the pitch?
Okay, so I did cover this in my presentation, but you probably weren't on yet. And the regulation that we use at Western Province Cricket Umpires Association is that the length of a pitch should be 20.12 meters from middle stump to middle stump. If it is out by up to 30 centimeters, then we continue with play, and we will just inform both captains that the pitch is either too short or too long by 15 centimeters, 20 centimeters, 25 centimeters, or 30 centimeters, whatever the case might be. So that is the maximum variation that we allow, 30 centimeters out. If it is more than 30 centimeters out, then we will instruct the ground staff to remeasure and repaint the creases so that the length of the pitch from middle stump to middle stump, from bowling crease to bowling crease, is 20.12 meters. If there is no ground staff available, then we will instruct the home captain to do the necessary to get the pitch length as close as possible to 20.12 meters. So if it's out by 30 centimeters or less, we play. If it's out by more than 30 centimeters, we need to correct it. I hope that answers your question, Mohammed. I'm sorry, I put you on mute because there was a lot of background noise coming from your side. Next hand up is Bakang. Bakang, please unmute your microphone and the floor is yours.
Good evening, gentlemen. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Go ahead.
Okay. My question is on rolling the pitch.
Mhm.
So that between the innings, the end of the first 13 team and then change of innings, is rolling compulsory, or the incoming betting team can just decide no, it's fine, it can be left as it is? And then, because obviously, you know, as in the first innings, the pitch deteriorates because there's up and downs and stuff.
Abdullah, you want to take that one?
Yeah. Rolling is an option to the batting captain. Batting captain does not have to exercise the option. And as you correctly alluded to it, there are sometimes that the pitch do deteriorate, and I had many instances on day 4 when there's a change of innings where the batting captain informs us, umpire, we do not want any rolling. So to answer your question, the law allows for rolling to take place if there's a change of innings. It's up to the batting captain at the time. The batting captain can decide whether he or she wants to exercise the option of rolling. If yes, you then go through the process, how long, which roller. But if they do decide they do not want the rolling, no problem at all. They'll inform you, you'll just inform the curator, no rolling to be done. Over, Tom.
Thanks, Abdullah. Happy, Bakang?
Yes, I'm happy. Thank you.
Great stuff. While we've been addressing the hands up in the meeting room, there's been more questions posted in the chat box. Merci asks, are the slides of yesterday available in the chat of today as well, please? Merci, we have one presentation for the first 6 lectures. So if you click on the link that I posted at 1942, you will be able to download the entire presentation. So that will include yesterday's slides, today's slides, and the slides that will be presented in lectures 3, 4, 5, and 6. Next question is from Tawanda. Do we have a strategic timeout in cricket for coaches to have a brief chat with players during a match? And if so, how long is it, Abdullah? I know the IPL is on at the moment and they do have sponsored SEAT strategic timeouts. Please talk us through those.
Yes, Tawanda. Many of the competitions, they have it in their playing conditions. It's called strategic timeout. It is currently in the IPL. The SA20 in South Africa also had strategic timeouts. And in the playing condition, it actually states there's a strategic timeout. It gives you the length of the timeout. It also spells out whether the coaches can come onto the field or not. In the SA20 playing conditions, it actually allows for the coach to come onto the field during the strategic timeout. it do give a number of coaches. You don't want 6 or 7 coaches onto the field, but it allows one coach to come onto the field during the strategic timeout. But this get governed by the playing conditions for that particular competition. So in the SA20, I'm not sure exactly how the IPL playing conditions works with regards to strategic timeouts. I can only speak of the SA20, which Tom and I was involved in this year, and the playing condition of the SA20 allowed coaches or the coach to come onto the field during the strategic timeout. Over, Tom.
Thanks, Dula. Next question is from Francis. He asks, in the case of removing the bails, what is the proper way to stump a batter out? What I've done, Abdullah, is I have added a link to the video you did at Somerset West Cricket Club explaining how the laws change when the bails are removed. It is a 3-minute video, Francis. Please have a look at that video. We will cover that is a later law that we will look at. So hang in there, but in the meantime, you can watch that video for answers of how to handle the bails being removed. Next question from Tawanda is back to rolling, Abdullah. Is there a limitation on the number of rolling requests?
Tom, I don't really understand the question. What do you mean by limitation on number of rolling requests?
I think he typed this question while you were answering the question about if a batting captain chooses a roller and the rolling happens, and then before they start batting, it rains, can he ask again for rolling? Or maybe he's asking about, can the batting captain change his or her mind to say to you, heavy roller 7 minutes, and then he walks off the field and chats to his coach, and the coach says, no, actually, we want a light roller for 4. Maybe just talk through those 2 scenarios, please, Dula.
Yeah, I'll start with the last scenario first. Occasionally, it can happen where you go to the batting captain asking, do you want rolling? If yes, which roller? They'll come to you and say, yes, we want rolling, 7 minutes, big roller. You then relay that to your fourth umpire or third umpire. And then a few seconds later, after chatting to the coach, they do change their mind. And they say, no, we don't want heavy roller, or we want the light roller. No issue with that. I then just inform the reserve umpire that instead of the big roller, they want the heavy roller. I'll allow it if if there's enough time. But let's say we've indicated the big roller, we now started rolling, and now they'll shout, no, we don't want the big anymore. We now want the small one. I'll then tell the batting captain, sorry, captain, you chose your big roller. I've informed the grounds curator. You see. Started. They will just have to. They chose the heavy it is. The second scenario, Tom, I forgot the second scenario.
Are you allowed to roll more than once? So before the rain and then after the rain.
So if there's a change of innings and the batting captain is then, as per the law, allows the option to have rolling. So when there's a change of innings, you'll go to the now new batting captain. You'll ask the batting captain, do you want rolling? Yes or no? Yes, I want rolling, umpire. Big roller, 5 minutes. you'll relay that message to the fourth umpire, who in turn will inform the curator. Rolling then takes place, 5 minutes. Soon as rolling is done, it now starts to rain. Now the pitch gets covered, an hour later play restarts. Batting captain then comes to you saying, "But umpire, it was raining. Can I have some more rolling?" You will decline that request, because when the innings ended, you asked the captain if he wants rolling. You exercised that option. The batting captain had rolling, so you will decline the request for rolling if it was done. If rolling was done before the interruption, you will inform the batting captain after the rain break, no rolling. You had your rolling before the rain interruption. Over, Tom.
Thanks, Dula. Next question is from Mohammed. He asks, what is the correct spacing of the stumps? I have copied and pasted a picture from the presentation of what a perfectly pitched set of stumps looks like. Obviously, 71.12 centimeters above the ground, and the spike at the bottom goes into the ground. And it should always be that a ball cannot fit through any two stumps. Okay, so they need to be from the outside edge of the off stump to the outside edge of the leg stump, 22.86 centimeters. My lights have just gone off here in the hotel, but I still have connection, so I will continue. And we're back on. Yanita asks, is a drinks break in a T20 compulsory after 10 overs? Abdullah, please take that one for us.
Yanita, we get guided here by the playing conditions for that particular competition. You will find many of the competitions that they do not have a drinks break in T20 games. The current T20 provincial competition in South Africa, in their playing conditions, there is not a drinks break after 10 overs. But you will find in other competitions across the world where they incorporate in their playing conditions that either they'll specify and say, yes, there will be a drinks break after 10 overs, or they actually leave it up to the two participating teams to decide whether they want to incorporate the drinks break or not. And then that decision gets made pre-series, because you cannot do it game to game. So pre-series, if they decide, yes, we want a drinks break after 10 overs, it will then happen in every game of that particular series. So Yanita, it's just depending on the playing condition for that particular competition. Some competitions, fun playing conditions in some competitions doesn't allow it. Some allows it. Some say you must take it. Some allows agreement between the two countries whether they want to take it or not. But we get playing condition for that particular competition. Over, Tom.
Thanks, Dula. Next question is from Mohammed. He asks, in respect to the length of the pitch, is it on the line or behind the line, the measurement? So, Mohammed, I did mention earlier that you always measure from the edge of the line closest to the stumps, and the stumps are pitched at the back edge of the bowling crease. So the length of the pitch is measured from the back edge of one bowling crease to the back edge of the other bowling crease, and that should be 20.12 meters. Looks like everybody is signing off and saying good night. I don't see any more questions in the chat box, and I don't see any more hands in the meeting room. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you all for your participation and your interaction. We will do it all again next week, Monday, and I will be sending out a new link for that meeting. A reminder that this meeting is being recorded. However, I will only be able to upload it onto our YouTube channel on Thursday or Friday because the Wi-Fi in my hotel does not allow. So I'll do it when I get back home later this week. Merci, you had your hand up. I think you were going to ask about the YouTube. So hopefully I've answered your question. So all that's left for me is to thank you all again for the evening, and we will reconvene next week, Monday, same time, same place, new Microsoft Teams links. And good night.
Thanks all.
Good night, everyone. Bye.
Bye.